Hi, so I'm Heather Staines. I'm the Director of Partnerships for Hypothesis. Gary and I have been talking on and off over the course of maybe the last 6 or 7 months more about how librarians might think about annotation as a tool, workflow tool, curation tool. So I was very excited to be able to put this session together, and even more excited when I learned that Micah was an annotation enthusiast. And then when I got very, very excited, he said, but I'm not going to be in the country during the Charleston conference. And I said, well, never fear, you're not off the hook yet. I've had remote presenters before, and I think we can make this work. So as I mentioned before, we want to do just some brief intros. Gary's hoping to do some demos as well, and we mostly just want to hear ideas from you and talk to you. So just a little bit about me. I am originally a military historian who didn't get an academic job because peace was breaking out in the 90s and the Russians were our friends and we wouldn't need to have any military or political historians ever again. So like many folks, I accidentally fell into publishing and worked for a variety of publishers and aggregators. I have 2 teenage boys, 15 and 17, so I think a lot about educational tools and resources as well. I say I know enough about the tech to get myself in trouble, but not out again. So there are people in the room who can vouch for that. I started working at Hypothesis almost 2 years ago, and I'll have to say, I wasn't a big digital reader. I hadn't invested a lot of time using tools to create any electronic resources, but I loved to put together programming, and when I figured out how I could use annotation to help me put together my programming, then I was completely sold. What I used to do when I prepared for Charleston was to have a Word document for each session where I would cut and paste URLs of interesting articles, and then when I would get ready to write the talk, I'd go, the heck was I thinking at this article? And it was just complete junk. So now what I do is I make an annotation, tag it Charleston, tag it Curation or AI or whatever, and I can always find my articles, I can share them with my panelists. Let me tell you, in the programming world, this has changed my life. Hypothesis, if you've not heard of us, we are a nonprofit open source technology company, and our mission is to promote an annotation layer conversation across the entirety of the web, which is something that was foreseen in the earliest visions, but not really realizable due to certain server issues, proprietary tools, and the like, which didn't really lend themselves to the vision that we had. In February 2017, the W3C standards body for the web approved annotation as a web standard, and this is critically important because this gives tool builders something that they can build towards. So in future versions of browsers, just like you tell your browser what your preferred search engine is, you should be able to indicate if you use an annotation tool. And annotations that I make with one tool should be able to interact with annotations that you make with another tool, just like we can email each other even though we use different email clients. So this is what the ecosystem that Hypothesis is working towards. You can see some of our funders across the bottom of the screen. We've been working with publishers and in the education space on an earned income model as well. Anyone can get a free Hypothesis account to do a variety of things on the left. It's a huge, the most frequent use of it is actually in collaboration, not to make public annotations, but to collaborate privately. It works across multiple formats of content, and if you do have the same version of content on multiple sites, you have one conversation that's taking place across those. We have a very robust API, so you can get your annotations out. This is not vendor lock-in, this is the opposite of that. We are community driven, and as an open source tool, we have many folks who are building tools on top of the code base. You can go to our page and get a free account. Now, folks ask me who's using Hypothesis. Actually, what they say is, how many journals are using Hypothesis? And I start to laugh and go, all of them, because you're not limited to a publisher setting up an integration or a site setting up an integration. As an end user, you take it with you. These are some of the sites who have decided to embed Hypothesis and maybe even to support their own annotation layer so they can facilitate collaboration on top of their content, on top of their preprint server as part of the peer review process. And we're involved in a lot of open access initiatives because annotation is really beneficial when you're talking about content that anyone can get to. The conversation just seems bigger, but it works on everything. Anything you can view in the browser and you can select, then you can create an annotation. And now I will hand over to Micah. I will advance your slides for you, just let me know when.
Great, thanks, and sorry that I couldn't be with you all in the room there, but I am in Iceland actually on vacation, and it is my birthday also, so I'm not that sorry. Thank you. A brief introduction about myself. So I'm a working librarian at North Carolina State University. Currently overseas because I'm on a Fulbright Schumann Scholarship studying open science policy and infrastructure here in the EU. I pretend to be a digital humanist at times, and it sort of informs my view on some of what we'll talk about today. I have some hobbies that you can see there on the screen. Working primarily in the area that we're calling digital scholarship, which I tend to think of in those four sub-bullet points there. Open research and scholarship, digital humanities, fair data, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and research infrastructure. And if you're interested, I have posted my speaking notes from this talk on medium.com, and you can actually go ahead and annotate them as I'm talking if you would like, and I'm tweeting out that from Carlston. Sorry, please, Heather.
Next slide.
I wanted to talk briefly about three reasons that annotation is exciting to me. The first is that I tend to think of annotation as enrichment. I believe that we're at the beginning of a new layer being added to the internet, and there's all these discussions about data and what's data or what isn't data, especially in scholarly circles. And I think that at some point we can put that discussion away as long as we can still do the work that we want to do as scholars, as librarians, as researchers, as publishers, on top of or in between the layers of the internet. There's a taxonomy that I love and mention all the time called TADIRA, the Taxonomy of Digital Research Activities in the Humanities, where I think that it lays out a really nice roadmap for what might be next generation style of scholarship. And one of the things that they define in this taxonomy is annotation, which you see on the screen. And I'll just briefly say a smaller version of that. How they define annotation is that it's the activity of making information explicit through comments, metadata, or keywords. This can be annotations, linked open data, or general metadata. So already these are annotations, thinking about them in a new way as enrichment fits in with things that we're already familiar with. Linked open data, metadata, it's just adding a new layer. The importance of annotation as curation for scholarship, I think, is that it gives a potential for an annotated object that we can apply or extract scholarly arguments, interpretations from the object itself, or inside or alongside the object. Thus far, that's mostly been contained in metadata records or in scholarly discourse or in educational environments like a museum or a cultural heritage site. But what the W3C standard for annotation gives us is the ability to democratize knowledges in and across many online spaces, in and across objects, and across sites. The next slide, please. This is where a tool like IIIF, the Image Interoperability, International Image Interoperability Framework, I think is really poised. The example that you're seeing on the slide there is from an online exhibition curated by folks at COGAP, which is a digital media agency for museums and archives. So on the surface, this looks like what museums and other cultural heritage institutions have done forever, taking layers of an object, of an image, and being able to look at it. What annotation does is, now that it's a web standard, that the conversation can happen in and on top of and alongside the object in a digital space. And CogApp and the stories example that they have there is a really great example of how they have published the annotations along with the various layers of this painting, and you can see the whole painting there also. There's a whole depth of technical knowledge behind IIIF that I am not prepared or able to talk about, but I encourage you to look up work by my friend and colleague Jason Rinaldo at North Carolina State University. So the second, next slide please. Second argument, or thing that's exciting about annotation for me is thinking about annotation as scholarship. This is me as a former scholarly communication librarian arguing that scholarship and publishing and knowledge sharing can and should happen at multiple points along the spectrum of intellectual output. So it's not always, doesn't always have to be when the final product is released in a published format, that it can happen before or during or in between. So I've actually gained great value from what I'll call close community reading, utilizing annotation to discuss a work, sometimes in public groups, but more often in public, which is how I tend to work. I have 3 examples on the screen there, but I think I'll just highlight the one on the right. This is a preprint that was put out from some folks in Canada at Simon Fraser University about the public dimensions of faculty work and review, promotion, and tenure documents. So it's a pre-journal article that was posted online. And about a month ago, there was a course at Simon Fraser, a graduate course, that decided to annotate this preprint as a class exercise. I happened to catch a tweet about it, and I ended up having a really enlightening conversation with the students in that course, in the comments, in the annotations on the side of that document, across time zones and fields of expertise and career perspectives. And it was a really rich learning and scholarship and research opportunity for me, and I hope for the others also. So annotation as curation is already modifying my behaviors as a researcher, engaging with a work as a researcher, linking ideas and works together. I think we're still at the very early stages of how this might change scholarly communication, but at a micro scale, my own experiences tell me that this is a new method that I'm starting to introduce in my work as a librarian with other researchers or as a collaborator in research. And the next slide, because of my current research interests here in Europe and also when I'm back in the States, I can't not think about anything we do in the information business without fitting it into my everything is infrastructure point of view. So this report from the Confederation of Open Access Repositories Next Generation Repositories Working Group outlines some behaviors and recommendations, obviously specifically about repositories, but there's some value that I gained from this that I think applies in the annotation world also. So the report basically offers a straightforward concept that repositories, as we know them, are fine, but there's a possibility for them to supplement the scholarly record in really new and fascinating ways if they adapt or adopt some of these recommended behaviors, which you see on the screen there. One concept that they tease out in the report is that the next generation repository should be active, meaning that it provides support for versioning, commenting, updating, linking across resources, and annotation. And for me, this is one of the most exciting possibilities that standards or technologies or tools like annotation offer, that there can be, or that as we move forward in this space, that there will be a human-to-human element that's interlinked with, on top of, or enmeshed inside the historical image or the scholarly paper, the data visualization, or an open access monograph. And my final slide, Heather, is basically that I'm at the place right now where I think annotation is very young, but I see incredible potential for annotation to be part of what we do as curation or as scholarship or as building collective knowledge. And we're just starting to see those benefits, and I'm really excited to see where it will go next. That's my section.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gary Price. I am a librarian and the founder and editor of InfoDocket. A little bit about me. I'm a graduate of Wayne State Library Information Science Program in beautiful downtown Detroit. I was born and raised in Chicago, currently live in DC. I did work at Wrigley Field. I don't have a baseball card, but as I said yesterday in our presentation, if I start yelling Budweiser or Pepsi, you might know what I was doing there. I'm very much a transportation, aviation, railroad geek. I've been that since I've been about 3 years old, going with my dad and watching the planes take off and land at Oakland Airport. I am the proud father of a 6-year-old. And as I said, are any of you familiar with InfoDocket? I know a couple people are because they're good friends of mine. InfoDocket is a site that I maintain, much to my wife's chagrin, 7 days a week, just about 365 days a year. And it is basically an aggregation, a curation of open web resources. In addition to InfoDocket, I met Heather, Dan, Curtis, Terry. There's a listserv that we're on from a gentleman by the name of Peter Brantley. I kind of serve as a de facto curator there. And I also do a lot of that same type of thing for librarians. One of them at the New York Times, another one at The Intercept, and I actually send a lot of material as I come across it to a reporter of national security at the New York Times and a reporter at the Intercept. So I think annotation has a lot of opportunities for our profession, our industry. I see the library and the librarian as a problem solver, and it's all about the right tool at the right time. And sometimes annotation is what your users will be interested in. Sometimes it's not. It will be useful for them. Sometimes it's not. But this is another tool for our information tool belt, if you like. So the first thing is awareness of that this is available. The other thing, in terms of hypothesis, is that it's free. I think are any of you K-12 librarians? I don't know how many of those, the ones that remain, which is a whole nother topic for a whole nother conference. But I think the academic library community and the vendors should be doing more to be reaching out to those K-12 libraries that still exist, and many of them who don't. And annotation is a great tool to talk about with them because it adds value to the classroom setting, and we all know that one of the biggest issues in K-12, library or not, is cost. And this is completely free, and they can be up and running because another thing that I've learned about using hypothesis in this case is that the learning curve is minimal. There's almost none. You can be up and running literally in a matter of minutes. I speak a lot about the fact that the library community doesn't do a very good job of curating, sharing, organizing what I would call open web resources. That might be a database from the Department of Transportation. That might be a new report that's available on the open web as a PDF from many different primary sources, government, think tanks, international governments, and the like. It's basically, we've let a lot of it up to the fact that if it's not it's in Google so everybody can find it, which is not the case. I really believe that we have a huge opportunity to be doing a better job of organizing that material and sharing it with other people. And I think sharing it through a system like Hypothesis is a very useful idea because you can curate, you can find useful reports, new tools, add a comment to it, and share it that way. But again, it's also a way to, if you want to use it inside of your library, to help build a collection of open web resources. As Heather was saying, put everything in one place, add comments to it, add tags to it, so then you can also get back to it. So it's a collection development building tool for open web resources and for just about any other type of material. You know, there are really no new bookshelves for open web reports. There is no really reviewing service, so you have to find things where you can. And while I try to do my best in sharing new reports on InfoDocket, I'm beyond Pluto in terms of the volume of what's out there. So everybody has a responsibility to do it, I think, and using an annotation tool like Hypothesis, I think, works very well. So it's, again, a resource hub of items to share with faculty, with students, to organize everything, and then once, say, here's the URL, I have added comments, or just as a hub, and then send it out as a newsletter. I think we can be adding a lot of value to to ourselves as professionals in an organization, and to the library in general, by, in addition to saying, very likely your library sends out a newsletter once or twice a month, whatever, and you say, well, we're having this lecture, and we're having that lecture, and we've got this new database and this new book. Well, I also think that a thing you might want to consider doing is adding some new open web resources. If you're doing a newsletter for the Political Science Department or Sociology, find 3 or 4 new things on the open web where they can just click on it, get the report, get to the database. In terms of what I do, when I get so many newsletters, the ones I'm most likely to open first are the ones that have value in them, something that I can start using right away. Event coordination, that's something that goes on in a lot of libraries. Putting like things together, all of these resources together in one place, and being able to share comments. Is this a good person to have? Let's make sure that this is ready, that type of thing. A couple of weeks ago, Project Info Literacy, based at the University of Washington, came out with a report talking about how, I think in this case, undergrads search and deal with news. One of the major findings of that report is that students want context with their news. As Micah was saying, and others were saying, this is a great way to add context to a news story. And this is a value-added service that the library can be providing. Here is the news story from The Economist. Here is the news story from the New York Times. Let's say we can annotate it with related resources that bring the context that students want in one place, one click, and they're able to access it. And the other thing that I think is very useful is the ability to annotate multimedia material. So you can say, instead of just saying, go to this YouTube video, you can say, go to this YouTube video, and at 15 minutes and 24 seconds, there is a discussion about this. And there are tools, I believe one of your developers has built a tool that makes it very easy to create start and stopping points in a YouTube video and share that directly in Hypothesis. So those are some of the ways that I use it as a tool to help me organize what I'm going to be posting or hope to be posting an info docket. But these are a few of the things that you can be thinking about in ways that you can use it. By the way, are any of you using Hypothesis or any annotation tool right now on a regular basis, other than my friend, colleague, Curtis, and the top guy at Hypothesis named Dan? No? Well, I think this is something you might want to take a look at. It's hard to see, so I'm just going to run through these slides very quickly because it's hard to see, but because what I need to do is put on the little add-on to get Hypothesis up and running. So let me run through these slides. We'll start to take some questions, and then we can do a live demo because, as my cousin who owns an online bakery says, we can talk about all this stuff, but unless you actually, in her case, taste it, or in your case, see it, it makes it a lot easier to get an idea of what the product is all about and how easy it is to do. So again, this is an example. It's not really easy to see, but this is a new article, and I made a comment to myself. This is something we might want to share in the next issue of, in the next posting on InfoDocket. This is an idea. This was a recent lecture by Justice Kagan at Harvard, and I said, add to the SCOTUS LibGuide, listen to Kagan's comment at 2421. Again, it's putting it's putting everything together in one place, which also makes it very easy to get back to. As somebody who is saving a lot of things, having it all in one place saves myself a lot of time. And I don't have any hair left to pull out. I need easy things to make it easy for myself to get back to things. And then just another example, I mentioned a moment ago, there's so much on the open web, and this is not the place for this discussion, but there are a lot of experts out there curating resources already for you based on topic. So the example here is from the National Library of Medicine, and every day they are curating new reports, documents, videos having to do with disaster relief, and related medical topics. So the example here is I'm going to an expert curated site and I'm annotating what they are doing there. So it's a way, again, to have information in a group setting. It's a way to have information flow and end up where it's supposed to end up with minimal effort. So what we are going to do is I'm going to take some questions, and I'm going to work and get the add-on to this browser so we can actually do a live demo.
So do we have questions?
myself or Micah.
We're recording this, so let me see. Oh, it's all- Crossing our fingers.
And this is sort of a question back to you, Heather. I think you showed me once the way a group of climate scientists were using Hypothesis. I don't know if you're going to show that case later.
We
Such a
could, we definitely could if we had time, but I can just describe it
Maybe
briefly.
describe, because
Yeah.
I think it's such a wonderful example of how experts can add context.
Yeah, I can definitely pull up that website. So we have a group that we work with called Climate Feedback. It's just climatefeedback.org if you want to go to the site. And when there are articles released about some aspect of climate change, extreme weather, what they do is distribute, there's more than 200 of them, they're around the world, they're in every conceivable subspecialty of on climate change, like paleoclimates, which I didn't know that was a specialty. They distribute it amongst about 5 or 6 of them, and then they go through the article and they annotate it in terms of out of context information, missing information, better information. They also give the article a score from like a +2 to like a -2. And they frequently do annotate on things that they fall in the positive category, so it's not just a negative site. In addition to that, they write up their summary comments on the website, which is, they call it feedback. And you can look at that, or you can actually click on a link which will take you to their hypothesis annotations on top of the article. So we are actually working with a number of other communities of interest amongst a variety of topics to kind of bring this technology out more widely. So maybe you're interested in correcting
For the
this information.
250,000 service members who
Sorry about
transition
that.
out of the U.S. military every year, one of the toughest parts is the search for a job that takes people.
Sorry about that.
We can edit that out later. So maybe you want to correct misinformation around anti-vaxxers or immigration or women in STEM or, you know, my son plays the tuba, misconceptions about tuba players. You could have a community group that people could it could be either comprised of experts that meet certain qualifications like climate feedback, or it could be the other criteria for joining, but that's something that we're working to kind of bring out more broadly.
What does it mean when you embed Hypothesis in your website, like some of these publishers and sites that you just go through?
Yep, so what Gary's doing is actually putting a plugin, which is how users, we have a plugin for Chrome and we have bookmarklets for the other browsers and for mobile. If you, as a website, whether you're a WordPress site or whether it's a regular hosted library publisher site, with like one line of JavaScript, it's literally one line. If you want to have certain behavioral configurations, there's a couple other lines, but if you go to our site, you put that on, that's going to make the tool visible to anyone who comes to the site, so they can learn about it, get started. In the publisher context, when we started working with publishers, they said, well, if we're going to make something visible by default on our site, we want to have our branding, we want to moderate it. Hypothesis moderates the regular public channel, but in the case if you're an organization that wants to do moderating, that's something you can do. In the educational context, we're rolling out integrations with the different learning management systems, any LTI compliant LMS, with single sign-on so the students can use their account. But if you are interested in putting it on your blog, a lot of people have done it, it will just be visible. People don't need to bring the extension or the bookmark with them.
So, that's not what that's, so if you wanted to embed it inside an extra host, it's not, you wouldn't necessarily have to install the browser part of it.
No. If you're going to embed it, you're going to do that, on your site. So we should chat later.
I just want to be sure I understand, you mentioned publishers adding a layer where you're using Hypothesis. Is that what you mean moderating the way you just discussed? Is that something different? Okay, got it.
Yeah, and there's 2 types of things that you can do on a site. You can add an open group that anyone can participate in if your primary use case is having people discuss content or post-publication peer review or something. But you might want to have a layer that's just limited to the journal, providing updates about the content, or the authors providing update on the manuscript. So that would be blocked so that only they can add content there. So there are a couple different use cases. Are you ready to go with that?
It's really interesting. In the amount of time, less than the amount of time that we were just talking, I was able to download the add-on and log in and be up and running. So this little, and Heather, please join in here, you're the professional trainer on this, amongst other things. This is Hypothesis. The little add-on was active. No? Go ahead.
Well, this is the tool over here. If you want to click on it and open that up.
There.
Sorry to do that. It's the problem with the PC. None of us, it's up to the arrow at the top.
Right here.
Left. The little arrow here.
I don't, better come over here.
Yeah.
If we get annotated it, I could
There we
point
go.
it right at it. There we go. So yeah, so when the tool's not in use, you can see it's really inobtrusive. Like even Gary, who's an expert, couldn't find it. But
I'm not a PC guy.
yeah,
That's not
so
PC.
so you can use this on, I won't say 100% of the sites on the web, but the vast majority, 98% of the sites on the web. And the site owner doesn't have to have done something, to enable it to work. Are you logged into your account?
Yeah.
Can I show this?
Sure.
So every person who gets a Hypothesis account has a page where all of their annotations automatically populate to. I'm gonna move you over a little bit, Micah. So this is what Gary was talking about, one site. So if you have a collaboration group, all the annotations of everyone in the group are going to go to a page, or a class, they're all going to go to the page. Then you're going to have to yell.
So they're not private annotations?
So there are different types of
Okay.
annotations. This is
Okay.
Gary's page.
Okay.
So Gary, on Gary's page, can see everything that Gary's done. But if you were to go to Gary's page, you would only see the things that
Okay,
were,
got it.
that were public.
So when you annotate, this is where it goes.
Yes. This is, so there's two parts of the tool. There's the client, which is the little bit that comes out over the page, and then there's the server where we store the annotations. And you can search all your annotations and access them here on your page. So if I click on this, I can see these are the annotations that Gary has made. You can get back to that annotation in context by clicking on the arrow. It will take you to the site. It will pop open the tool, and it will, this is a page
Yeah,
load.
if you scroll down, I highlighted something.
Okay, it should automatically scroll down. This is a busy page, so maybe it's taking
Yeah.
the time. So you can send someone with precision, rather than emailing someone a URL and saying, can you look at the third paragraph and the second line? Isn't that your mom's book? You can instead highlight it, send it to someone. And the person who clicks on the link doesn't have to have Hypothesis. They don't have to know what the tool is or anything. They'll automatically go there to see. You can, if you are on this page here, if you, oops, reverse tools here. I hate to see. If you get rid of the filter on Gary's page, you see all of the publicly visible annotations anywhere in the world. So we just passed 4.1 million annotations, 20% are public. So when you come here, you can see, the controls are reversed, everything that people have annotated, what they've said, if they have more than one public annotation. So you see a lot of students annotating for class. Got a lot of annotations here. And you can search it. So if you want to see, sorry, it's reverse tools on this touchpad. If you want to see everything that someone has annotated about, just guessing here, fish, you can pull up and see anything that includes that. Here's something, historynerd.net on Gulf of Mexico. Someone's using this for editing here. It's not directly relevant to your sub-project. So you can search all your annotations at any time, get back to the thing in context, and if you're in a group, see what the other people have been doing in the group and filter on there. Micah, you want to add anything? I think we turned the volume down when Gary started playing videos, but if you want to add something, we can turn that back up. One sec. This is why we wanted to use Gary's computer, but the best laid plans.
Here we go.
Okay,
Back.
go for it, Micah.
All right, yeah, so I just wanted to mention, I've shared some links in the Skype window, if you can pull it up. If not, that's fine. But one of the other examples I was going to talk about is, so I'm relatively new at North Carolina State University, and I'm the first ever open knowledge librarian. So one of the tasks that I've taken on is discussing within the libraries what and how we want to define open knowledge. It's more than open access. It's some parts of open educational resources, part of open science, but all mixed together and bigger than all of that. So something we started actually this fall, as I'm away, is a reading group, which I think I've shared the link.
Yeah.
There's not much in there yet because we've just started, but the idea is that we'll read a journal article or a report or something or a media object together, time and distance shifted because I'm not there, and then over the next 5 or 6 months, we'll start to narrow down through this collaborative reading and annotation, a better sense of what open knowledge is at NCSU libraries. So this is a public group, but we're using it mostly. I made it public because it's about open knowledge, and I'd love to have other people contribute in our discussion there. But I think that's an example of how I've used it in a private space, but allowing it to be public. And it's great. It's been a really helpful way to have the discussion, especially since I'm not there this semester.
If I understand this correctly, each annotation is assigned, or each subject is assigned a DOI. Can you explain that a little bit?
No, not right
Okay.
now. So we get a lot of questions about DOIs, right? I mean, there's 4.1 million annotations, and DOIs are typically $1 for DOIs, so we couldn't write on that. Nor should every annotation roar into DOI. The way that we work with DOIs is we work with cross-ref event data, and an annotation that's made on a piece of content that has a DOI, or an annotation card that references another piece of content that has a DOI. So you could have one annotation that has references 6, but you can add in links to others. Those become part of the cross-ref event data project to be indexed by Google. And we do get questions around cross-ref invented, created, set aside a new type of DOI that's intended for shorter form content like peer review annotations or any kind of annotation. So what we're in the process of is discussing with different publishers, web servers, and the like, what makes sense. If you're a user and you want to cite an annotation, which you can do now because a unique persistent web address and an identifier, you could cite it, but you might say, hey, assign this a DOI, tick a box, and then who would assign the DOI, whether it's the publisher of the original content or whether it's us, that's something that we would look into. But it's an evolving conversation around identifiers. Something doesn't need to have a DOI for you to annotate it.
More questions?
We're almost out of time. I want to say that this is just a workload tool. So people will say, well, how many use cases are there? Well, I heard about 5 yesterday. I talked to some librarians early on and they said, we can annotate purchase orders and invoices. We're making each other crazy by emailing these things back and forth and going, can you look at column 6, row 3? If you can view it in the browser, and we have a little tool called DocDrop where you can type a CSV file or something into the browser, or even if it's on your intranet, you can view it in the browser and select it, then you can annotate it. So you can ask each other questions. Is this right? Or Joe better hurry up and pay the purchase order. You can use it for any type of workflow. I've got publishers who were migrating content from one site to another, and they knew that all their landing and informational pages were going to change. So they actually, in the olden days, they might have printed out all those websites, marked them up with stickies, delivered them on the intern's desk, and said, hey, make these changes. Instead, they put together a group. They actually marked up the pages, change this link to this, or do you think this is going to change? And then it's like, I don't think it's going to change. And then they can have a whole conversation right on the thing. This is one of the things that I think is everybody says the killer app, but we've always thought of the web in terms of page level addresses. It's what we have. But any URL can have a potentially infinite number of sub-addresses for a sentence, for a paragraph, for a cell in a CSV file. So if we think about how we can do linked data that's spread out on multiple locations, you don't have to do anything to the content, you don't have to retag it, you don't have to retouch it, you don't have to mess with the DTD. So that's the thing that I'm most excited about when I talk about annotations. Yes?
Can you use it?
Do you want to use it? Just we're going to have to break in a second, but
This is my dream. Can you use it to privately annotate a shared Google Doc?
Google Doc?
But we are not yet built a widget to allow annotation inside Google Docs. If there is a way to do that.
Yeah, there may be somebody out there who's working on that. You know, this is the challenge with proprietary stuff, right? Anyway, I think we do have to break because I know there's probably another session coming up, but thank you guys for coming and particularly for bearing with us on the technical side. And thank you on your birthday, Micah.
Happy birthday.
And if you need anything, any questions answered, you know where to find us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.